His book was an instant hit, and in 1663, John was admitted to a very exclusive club of scientists, the Royal Society of London, for improving natural knowledge. Although John modestly described his accomplishment as just shopkeeper's mathematics, he developed a method for predicting the arrival of a plague year. This was a tremendous scientific advance. For more than a century, the people of London had suffered regular epidemics of plague, one almost every 20 years. Tens of thousands had died, and the city's inhabitants lived in fear of the next outbreak. By studying the bills of mortality, John realized that in the months leading up to an outbreak of plague, deaths from all causes were higher than usual. Sickly years, he called them. The winter of 1664 was the start of a very sickly year in London. Goodwoman Phillips' death was the first one to be recorded as plague, but he was sure it wouldn't be the last. The sickly year theory. By watching the number of deaths closely and seeing as they began to rise each week, John Graunt was able to predict a plague epidemic. He looked at all deaths, not just from plague, because he knew the system for recording deaths in London wasn't very accurate. Years before, King James I had ordered each London parish, the district surrounding a church, to begin keeping track of all the local births and deaths. Officials called parish clerks were in charge of the records. Since there weren't enough clerks to track down all the births and deaths in the crowded city, they depended on searchers, like the one who visited Goodwoman Phillips's home, to collect the information they needed. This system had a few problems. For one thing, the searchers had no medical background. When it wasn't clear what someone had died from, they had to guess. This led to some unusual entries in the bill of mortality, like teeth, pinning, evil, fools, etc., and found dead. In addition, the searchers weren't paid much, so for the price of a drink and a few extra pennies, many searchers would agree to write down anything they were told. When someone had died of plague, their family would be eager to bribe the searcher to cover it up. Otherwise, the whole family would be shut up in the house to prevent them from spreading plague seeds. John Graunt estimated that up to 20% of plague deaths were recorded as something else in the bills of mortality. The third problem was that the parish clerks only recorded the births and deaths of citizens who belonged to the official religion, the Church of England. This created big gaps in the official statistics because it left out other religious groups, Jews, Catholics, Quakers, and nonconformists. There were a few more plague deaths in London through the rest of that cold winter. And as the weather warmed up, the numbers began to increase. In the first week of June, 43 deaths from plague were recorded, as many as there had been for the whole year up till then. The next week, there were 112. By fall that year, 7,000 people were dying each week. Plague had returned to London with a vengeance. Soon, anyone who could afford to leave the city began packing their bags. John Graunt stayed where he was. He had his shop to look after, but more importantly, he wanted to keep an eye on the information coming from the parishes each week. His theory about sickly years leading to plague years was being proven before his very eyes. En British.